Winter in the medieval era did not need blizzards to kill people. It did not need howling winds or the sky collapsing. It only needed silence. A smooth sheet of ice, pale and flat, lying there as if harmless. And a human who believed they could walk across it. No one screamed when the ice broke. No one had time to cry for help. The cold water gave no time. It locked the lungs, dragged the body down, and erased all traces within a few heartbeats. The next morning, the river was still calm. No one knew what had happened. Medieval people lived among such traps every day. They had no thermometers, no ice maps, no modern science to measure thickness or predict safety. But strangely, they did not step onto ice blindly. They knew, not through numbers, but through a survival rule passed down across generations, a rule the body remembered more clearly than the mind. They called it living ice and dead ice. One kind allows you to cross. The other will swallow you without a sound. Two surfaces that look almost identical, yet only one of them gives you a chance to return home before night falls. This was not superstition, not a story told by the hearth. This was knowledge paid for with lives, carved into the collective memory of people who had no right to be wrong. And if you lived in their world, you had only one chance to read the ice correctly. Read it wrong. Winter would not forgive. For medieval people, ice was not a winter landscape. It was a road, a shortcut, the only way to cross a river when bridges had rotted, when currents ran fierce, when going the long way meant hunger, cold, and exhaustion. No one stepped onto ice out of curiosity. They stepped onto it because there was no other choice. And that was precisely what made ice the deadliest killer of winter. It appeared at the exact moment humans were forced to trust it. By ice was not like death by cold. Cold gives you time. You shiver, you ache, you look for fire, you turn back. Winter water does not. When a body falls into water near freezing point, the lungs seize instantly. Blood withdraws from the limbs. Muscles stiffen like stone. Even the strongest person loses the ability to swim within seconds. Clothing soaks up water and becomes a burden. The current below drags the body away, and the ice above closes again as if nothing had ever happened. No traces, no witnesses, only an empty place left behind in the village. That is why the greatest fear of winter did not lie in wind or snow, but in deception. Ice looks the same, but to medieval people, it was never a simple surface. They did not look at ice with an engineer's eyes. They looked at it the way one looks at a living being, something with age, with memory, with states of life and death. A river never freezes in the same way. The current beneath continues to move, even if very slowly. There are deep stretches and shallow ones, places where groundwater rises, spots that receive midday sunlight, others that remain in shadow all day. Medieval people did not call this physics. They called it the river's temperament. And to survive, you had to learn how to read it. They knew that ice does not die all at once. There is newly formed ice, still exchanging heat with the water beneath. There is ice that has gone through many cycles of melting and refreezing, appearing thick but already hollow inside, already tired. And there is old ice, opaque, white, silent, looking the most solid of all, yet it is the most dangerous. These differences cannot be measured with a ruler. They can only be felt. Medieval people felt with their ears first. Living ice is not completely silent. It carries a low groan, a deep, steady cracking sound, like old wood contracting in the cold night. That sound did not frighten them. On the contrary, it was a sign that the ice was still working, still connected to the water, still responding to its environment. Ice that was utterly mute was what made them stop. They felt with their eyes. Color spoke volumes. Gray ice Slightly translucent meant water was still moving beneath. Opaque white ice, like curdled milk, was often dead ice, filled with trapped air, stripped of elasticity. They did not call this crystal structure. They simply knew that this color would not hold a person. They felt with their feet. The first step was always a test, not a long stride, but a slow transfer of weight. Living ice has a faint elasticity, almost invisible, only perceptible. Dead ice is rigid, unresponsive. And it is precisely that rigidity that serves as the final warning. But the most important thing was not in the ice itself. It lay in collective memory. Medieval people were rarely the first to cross a stretch of river. They watched old footprints. They remembered who had fallen where the year before. They knew which sections claimed lives every winter. Some places required no explanation. They were simply avoided. This knowledge was never written down. It was passed on through short sentences, through a shake of the head, through silence when someone asked too many questions. In that world, living ice and dead ice were not abstract concepts. They were the boundary between returning home before nightfall and never returning at all. And the problem was that not everyone read correctly. There were kinds of ice more dangerous than dead ice. Ice that looked alive, but was, in truth, only waiting. The real danger does not lie in thin ice. Thin ice usually gives warning. It creaks, it cracks, it reacts the moment you test it. What kills is ice that convinces you that you are safe. Medieval people understood this through deaths that needed no explanation, through mornings spent searching for someone and finding only footprints that ended in the middle of the river. The first type they feared most was living ice. It sounds paradoxical, but living ice means ice that is still exchanging with the water, still influenced by the current below. It is slightly softer. It responds. You step onto it and feel it give. That sensation is reassuring. It gives you confidence. And that confidence is what opens the door to greater error. Because living ice is not uniform. One step may be safe, the next may not. All it takes is a pocket of groundwater, a small eddy, a hidden vein of flow, and the entire surface changes character in an instant. Then there is dead ice. Old ice, opaque white, silent to a frightening degree. It looks solid as stone. No groaning, no response. It bears initial weight very well. The first person steps on and feels stable. The second follows and also feels stable. And when its threshold is crossed, it does not crack piece by piece. It breaks as a whole. There is no time to correct. No step backward. The ice opens like a mouth. But the true climax, the thing that cost entire villages the most lives, was false living ice. Ice that had melted and then refrozen. A hard surface, hollow underneath. At a glance, by sound, by feel, it was indistinguishable from safe ice. Medieval people called it tired ice. It had endured too many freeze-thaw cycles. It kept its shape but lost its strength. A person stepping onto it did not die immediately. The first step held. The second step held. And when the weight settled over the hollow point, the ice collapsed without warning. Precisely because it gave you time to trust it, it was more dangerous than any other kind. And then there was another layer of climax, quieter, more ruthless. Ice does not kill people who cross alone. People kill themselves when they cross alone. Medieval people rarely crossed ice by themselves, not because they were afraid, but because they understood. Ice cannot be read with the eyes of one person alone. It is read by multiple bodies. One person listens. One watches. One tests. They spread their weight. They keep distance. They let the ice speak little by little. Most deaths happen when someone broke that rule. When someone hurried. When someone trusted their own experience more than collective memory.
It
when the
cannot hold
ego
our
stepped
weight,
onto
not
the
for long.
ice before the
We
village.
must.
In that world, confidence was not a virtue. It was the seed of death. That is why the final rule of living ice, dead ice, did not lie on the ice itself. It lay in how people looked around them. Medieval people read the riverbanks before they read the ice. They watched which way the trees leaned. They watched where mist rose. They watched whether old footprints faded or remained. They knew which stretches claimed lives every year, even when the ice looked perfect. Those sections needed no warnings. They only needed to be avoided. The climax does not end with a rule. It ends with a heavy realization. Ice never betrays anyone. It only acts according to its nature. The one who loses is the person who believes they have finished understanding. In the medieval winter, mistakes did not come from lack of knowledge, but from the moment you thought you no longer needed to listen. If you are still here at this point, I want to ask you a very simple question. Have you ever noticed a warning sign in nature that others ignored? A moment when you stopped while someone else kept going. Leave a comment. Stories like those are sometimes exactly what helps someone else survive. At this point, it may seem that living ice and dead ice are merely two physical states, a crude rule for avoiding a fall into freezing water. But that is only the surface of the story. The real twist lies elsewhere. This rule was never only about ice. It was about how medieval people viewed the entire world around them. To them, anything that still moved, still responded, still conversed with its environment was alive. And anything that was too still, too rigid, too perfect was already dead. Dead ice was not dangerous because it was weak. It was dangerous because it no longer changed. It no longer adapted. It no longer warmed. It was like a trap that had already been completed. This way of seeing did not stop at rivers and water. Medieval people applied the same logic to forests, to snow, to weather, even to people. A forest that was unnaturally silent in winter was not a refuge, but a place where animals had fled or were lying in wait. Snow that was too smooth, that held no footprints, often concealed deep pits beneath. A person who was too rigid, too confident, no longer willing to listen to the village's counsel, was also seen as someone who had stepped onto the dead ice of their own life. This explains why so much medieval survival knowledge was never written into books. Writing fixes things in place. Fixed means dead. These rules were passed on through short stories, through vague warnings, through the memory of a name that no longer appeared. They forced the listener to observe, to feel, to adjust constantly to each season, each river, each different cold year. There was no universal formula, only continuous attention. The response to this twist lies in an uncomfortable truth. We have lost the ability to read the world that way. We are accustomed to stable surfaces, to numbers, to forecasts, to the sense that if something looks solid, it must be safe. But dead ice teaches the opposite lesson. The thing that looks most perfect is sometimes the thing that stopped living long ago. That medieval people did not believe they controlled nature. They only tried to listen to it a little longer. And in their world, survival did not come from being stronger or smarter, but from never believing that one had fully understood. Living ice gives you a chance because it is still in dialogue. Dead ice kills because it is silent. And sometimes that silence is the final warning. Medieval people did not see themselves as conquerors of nature. They did not believe that humans could defeat winter, defeat ice, or defeat the cold. They believed in something far more modest, that survival was possible if one listened long enough. That is why living ice and dead ice were not tricks for crossing winter. They were an attitude toward life, a way of standing before the world without rushing to declare oneself safe. Today, we have technology, warnings, maps, and forecasts. But in exchange, we have lost something very old, the ability to read small, ambiguous signs that are never printed into words. We trust stable surfaces, things that look solid, the feeling of control. And because of that, we are more likely than ever to step onto dead ice, not only on rivers, but in decisions, in choices, in how we judge people and the world around us. This story does not teach you to return to living like the medievals. It reminds you that some forms of knowledge never become obsolete, that the most dangerous thing is not always the loudest one, but often the thing that is too quiet, too smooth, too easy to trust. That sometimes what saves a life is not moving forward, but stopping, listening, and accepting that you do not yet understand enough. Medieval people survived, not because they were better than us, but because they were less complacent. They knew that nature owed humans no safety, and so they moved slowly, looked carefully, and trusted collective memory more than personal ego. That was not fear. It was respect. If this story made you think, take a moment to share in the comments. Have you ever stopped because something felt not quite right, even when everything looked completely safe? Moments like that, however small, are sometimes the line between continuing on and paying the price. And if you want to keep exploring forgotten survival knowledge, the ways people once endured when they had nothing but experience and attention, consider subscribing to the channel. Here, we do not tell stories of glory. We tell stories of how people stayed, endured, and lived through winters where mistakes only needed to happen once.